I know where there's some, right here in the hall, clerk.
No, Molly, not in there. I have
Hi there, and welcome back to another restoration and another Zenith. I hadn't planned on doing another Zenith console, but this one became available, and it looks so similar and yet is so different from the last one. The cabinet's in fair shape. A lot of alligatoring and wear on the top. We'll see if we can bring that back to life a bit. Sides are fine. Just the usual punishment the years bring to a radio. This one has a little bit different looking radio from the last one. It tips out. And it's an old-fashioned AM FM radio. It has actually two FM bands. This and the middle one and the lower one. And the lower one rather goes from 42 to 48, 40 something. And the upper one goes from 86 to 108. So this is before the modernization of the FM bands. AM is as usual. The switch says FM 45, FM 100, and STD, which means broadcast. This one has a record player, so there's the record change button. Here's the tuning. This is radio or phono. And here's the volume on-off switch. It's a little bindy, but that's okay. So that's one part of it. Kind of interesting. It's a different chassis than the last one I worked on, but it's still Zenith style. This is the interesting part for me. That is the turntable. It is a Zenith, and it has, lo and behold, two tone arms. This one has come off its mounting, but it'll be easy to get back on. But it has this, this is a standard Cobra-matic color, little Cobra eyes. And then there's this god-awful green thing back here. And the reason for two tone arms is right here on this label. 78 and 33 1/3. So one of these tone arms is for 33 1/3 records, the other is for 78s. I'm not sure which is which yet. I presume because the 33 1/3 is in green, that the green tone arm plays 33 1/3. Has a changer, very steeply angled record drop right here. It kind of surprises me, but if it works, what the heck? And this warning flag. I haven't looked into this at all yet, but it's such an odd looking thing. Two tone arms, that garish green, that red flag that's hanging up in the air like that. This is going to be a fun thing to take apart, I think. Let's take a look at the back. Okay, there's the reverse. This is a model. What's it say? 9H985LP. The R is for record player, the LP is for long play. 9 is 9 tubes, and the H, I believe, is still 1951. It does have the Armstrong, half of an Armstrong FM label, licensed under Armstrong something or another. Inside, the chassis is mounted vertically behind the front panel, the control panel. It looks really shiny and clean in there. I don't know if it's because of the way it's mounted. Let me close that and we'll look. I would guess that's why. It's mounted vertical. It's vertically rather. It's under a shelf here, so dust can't settle in the box very easily. It looks all complete. Very happy about that. The this can right here, power filters I presume, is dented. Has 3 dents on the top. Don't know if that's good or bad. We'll find out. Here's the label inside with the antenna stapled right to it. Chassis 9E21, 117 watts. Down there is where the albums are stored, and here's the speaker, which looks to be fine too. These 2 holes, one here and one here, are for mounting or for shipping bolts that stabilize the turntable. All the screws in the back are in all the way around, so I think this is going to be an okay project. The model 9H985LP. All right, I'll look up a little history on this. Let's start by decoding the serial number of this radio. It's stamped on the back of the cabinet. It's 9H985R space LP. OldRadiozone.com has kindly posted a decoding, magic decoding ring for Zenith radio model numbers. And we can start here. The number of tubes, 9, we knew that. I had made a mistake about what the character in this position was. It's an H, and I thought H referred to the model year, but it does not, in fact. It refers to the power requirements in this case, and what the set provides. So in this case, it's 115 volts, and it's a receiver with FM and broadcast. So the H stands for 110, 115 volts AC, and includes FM. The year, and this is where it gets interesting, because Zenith, like all major radio manufacturers during World War II, stopped manufacturing radios. So there was an interruption in their numbering system. But the Old Radio Zone has this table that I believe is originally from, well, I can't tell that. I don't know where this comes from. But our receiver has a 985, so a 9 in this position and an 85 here. And according to this chart, the 9 indicates that it was made in 1949. And the cabinet type is 50 plus, in this case an 85 console. And by the way, this chart also had to do with the cost of the cabinet type. These were the cheapest, tabletops were the cheapest, chair sides were mid-range, and the consoles were the expensive puppies. And I'll show you an ad in a minute that I think reflects what they were worth at the time. So our 9H985 is a 9-tube, 115 volt receiver with FM, made in 1949 with a console cabinet. That helps a lot. Here's a magazine advertisement from 1948 showing a very similar cabinet style. In fact, I couldn't say it wasn't the same. Down here in this corner, and I apologize for the quality of this, but it has the same physical arrangement. It has that tip-out tuner, and then the Cobra-matic tone arm in its usual spot. And what it doesn't show is whether these doors down here are open, and which one is the speaker, which side is the speaker, and which side is the album storage space. But it's probably this one. It's probably the Heppel-White. I think the Heppel-White number, I can't read anything like that there, might have been 988, but I'm not sure. So it's in this range. It's a Heppel-White radio. This one was 275, as I recall, in 1948. So we'll call it, for want of more information, probably a Heppel-White from 1948-49 era. The cabinet number seems to strongly suggest it's from 1949. I would call this, without doubt, I would call this a transitional radio. And so the question becomes, what makes it a transitional radio, and what's it transitioning from to? So the first thing that makes this a transitional radio is that it has a really wonky FM setup. It has 2 FM bands. You don't often see that these days. The other thing that makes it transitional is it's a wonky turntable. It has 2 tone arms, and you don't see that very often these days. Let's address the first one first. FM. Why are there 2 FM bands on this radio? And that has to do with our friends at the Federal Communications Commission and FM standardization, which they did. So what happened was, in 1941, FM had been around since before the war, and there were experimental FM broadcasters and FM receivers prior to World War II. But it never took off. Armstrong couldn't sell it hard enough to make it take off and get the backing of GE and so on and so forth, or RCA rather. But after the war, or during the war even, but it became popular enough that the FCC stepped in and established commercial FM bands. And in 1941, they did the first one as 42 to 50 megahertz. They allocated 40 channels, 40 stations, each with a 200 kilohertz wide bandwidth. So, 1941, great, we got FM as a sanctioned by the FCC. And that lasted for 4 years. 1944, the FCC moved the band to 88 to 108 megahertz, allocating 100 different station channels. I think they had the same bandwidth, and still do. So that, as you might guess, caused some disruption. The FCC recommended or recognized that might be the case, and so they said, during the transition from 1941 to from the 42.5 megahertz to the 88 to 108 megahertz band, stations could broadcast on both bands up until midnight, January 8th, 1949. And so this radio was introduced 1948-1949, right around this bit of chaos right here, which is why it has these two FM bands on it. So that's the first thing that I call it. The reason I call it a transitional radio is transitioning. It was supporting the transition from 42 to 50 megahertz, and shifting that to 88 to 108. At the time that that tuner was made, the 9E21, they were probably still stations around that were broadcasting on one band or the other. So in order to give their customers the ability to pick them all up, Zenith made a dual band FM radio. And again, this is FM mono, not stereo. So the complexities of bandwidth and all the stuff you have to do to get stereo weren't in place just yet. So that's the first thing. Now let's talk about the other thing that makes this a transitional radio, and that is the wonky turntable. Why is that thing that way? Well, Zenith had some market pressures they had to meet head on as quickly as it could, and the Twin Cobra seemed like the likely way to do it. The first pressure was in 1948. Columbia Records introduced the long play microgroove record, 20 minutes plus per side. It had been under development, I think actually since before the war, but was finally Columbia was able to figure out how to manufacture it and make it work by 1948. So that was introduced as the very first long play record, Mendelssohn Concerto in E minor. And there it is, the first LP ever mass produced by Columbia. So the LP required a very lightweight head, not much needle pressure to play those guys, otherwise you start carving the vinyl away. But Cobra-matic was a step ahead. It already was on that path, and it was a huge sea shift from the original tone arms before the war, like this monster. This guy weighs about an ounce. It weighs 29 grams. It's just humongous. And the Cobra-matics that were introduced, this is a 78 RPM cartridge, by the way, and the Cobra-matics that were introduced after the war also used a very lightweight tone arm and cartridge that on this scale doesn't weigh anything. That's the Cobra-matic 78 RPM cartridge right there. Of course, the tone arm has a holder and a spring to soften the dropping the tone arm when it's doing regular or when it's playing, changing records. But you know, that's a huge shift from this monster to this monster. So Zenith had a head start. Unfortunately, the head start, even though it was a head start with a lightweight tone arm, was 78 RPM only. And how do you solve that problem? How do you get a turntable that can play that new LP record to market as quickly as possible and without breaking the bank on the way? The Twin Cobra was the solution, but it was kind of a wonky solution, and I'll show you why. This is what Zenith came up with, the Twin Cobra tone arms. As these lovely models are pointing out, this Cobra plays standard records. That's the standard tone arm, the Cobra-matic tone arm right there. And this one plays long playing records. And look what they've done. It's like they've plopped a copy of this tone arm down right here. It dangles off the edge like I don't know what. It's not a pretty sight. Here's a real one, and it's green. It's that lovely green that we have in the one we're working on, and it's just plunked down right beside the other one. And they've carved a hole out of the cabinet right here for it to rest in, which is considerate, I guess. But the deal with this was, you could play a stack of 10 or 12-inch 78s on this turntable. To stack them on there, it would change down through them, and all would be fine. But in order to play a LP, the new LP, you could only play one at a time. You couldn't have a stack of them. And you kind of had to get this tone arm up in its clutch position, brake position rather, and then you could swing this green thing over there and drop it on the LP and have it play normally. Not a great solution. I suspect it only lasted a couple of years. I think this one looked so lame. and this is speculation on my part, but I think this one is so lame looking that that's why they came up with the one that's in our cabinet, where this green tone arm has been shifted over here, or over here, I guess. They had to redo a new pan for it, but they put it in a place that at least didn't look like it was an afterthought. It looks like it actually belonged there. But this one sure doesn't. This is just plain ugly. Not that the other one is any better looking, but it got Zenith out of a hole. They could, with the Twin Cobra, they could play LPs while they were engineering the next generation of the Cobra-matic turntable, the one that was in the prior radio that we did earlier this year, that played all sizes, all speeds. You know, you could pick anything. With the same tone arm. You did have to change the cartridge out. There was a cartridge for 78s and there was a cartridge for 33 1/3 for LPs, just as there are in these two tone arms right here. So this was an interim solution, just like we knew it was.